Yeah.
What up, what up, what up? What's good? Welcome to Hip Hop and Theology, podcast expressing God, the OG of hip hop.
I am Joel Dautruche. I thank you so much for just coming to join us on this. I
Yes.
appreciate it.
Yep. And I'm so excited to be here.
Well,
Cool.
Joseph, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Same here. I'm really honored to be here on here with you.
Soul of Hip Hop by Daniel Hodge. And it says that we all know theology is a study of God, how God interacts, intercedes, speaks, lives, thinks, wants, and is. And hip hop is repeatedly shows how God showing up in the most unusual and interesting places. So hip hop theology is in essence a study of the Godhead in the urban context, with the goal of better understanding God's rich and complex love for everyone. I think from there we can take off on this really amazing song. I think an even more amazing video if people haven't seen it, which is both loved and hated. I can't remember. I think it was Wednesday morning, I was bringing my wife to a shoot. She was doing a video shoot somewhere. And it was 6 o'clock in the morning or something. And turned on the radio, Steve Harvey Morning Show. And the first thing they started discussing was how incredibly, how do they use heart? It's almost like how incredibly satanic and sacrilegious the song would be. One more quote. This is from an article in Time magazine. And I think this pretty much covers how I see it, and we'll all discuss. His name is Ryan Betancourt, and he talks about how scholars have come away impressed by the video's attention to detail and conceptual sharpness. He talks about how deeply researched that the video is and built on powerful historical narrative that centers queerness in historical and religious spaces where it is too often erased. First thing that captured me when I first saw the video is when Lil-Nas-X, he says, "In life we hide the part of ourselves we don't want the world to see. We lock them away, we tell them no, we banish them. But here we don't. Welcome to Montero." And as a budding theologian, as a person who considers themselves Christian, but is open to all religious contexts, I think just as a person in general, as a member of the human race, we're all hiding so much. And I'm so happy that this came out to really tell us we're allowed to be open.
I think you said Betancourt was the one who was talking about the film and how well researched it was. Definitely powerful. For me, what caught my attention was actually the title, which is actually based off of a film. I don't know if it was 2017 2018 by Call Me By Your Name. But it deals with the same subject matter, this notion of hiddenness. And so throughout the film itself, they bring in thoughts of Heidegger and from a particular novelist that talks about how we hide ourselves. There's always a sense of hiddenness. There's always something we hide. I would almost say that every time we present ourselves to someone, there's something that gets hidden so that we show ourselves something. So, however, I think what Lil-Nas-X was really trying to say is that part which is so important to me, right? Which is so important, which makes me who I am. That is something that I have to hide, and that is something that he wants to open up about. And that is his sexuality. Which is a critical, important part of not only for him but for all people, right? Our sexuality, our gender, our becomingness of that. It's a part of who we are. And so this question of hiddenness, the internal space, that secret that he brings in, he goes, I have to go into my inner self to reveal to you who I am. And it's going to be in those hidden and dark places that I'm only able to show you that.
So a caveat, right? Mm-hmm. I am a Howard University alum, and I am a Baptist. So I say all that to say that before I can even give an initial comment, I feel the need to somewhat introduce myself and establish protocol, right? Because that's where I come from, and those are kind of like the institutions of belonging that have formed me, right? So Joseph Reed's pronouns are they, them. Once again, it is an incredible honor to be here. And even as I continue to say that it is an honor to be here, I need to speak the name of my sister, Minister Candace Simpson, who you all originally reached out to, but because she is such an awesome and such an humble individual, she said, thank you all for the opportunity, but I think I know somebody who can flesh this out a little bit more. And that somebody was me. And I'm just like incredibly humbled by that, right? And then, by day, I work for a state education agency here in DC. And then by night, I am a junior digital media major at the University of District of Columbia. So great, I've got my introduction out of the way. Now we can dive in and now we can actually have this conversation, right? So Lil-Nas-X released this video, released this social media moment on Friday, March the 26th, 2021. Friday, March 26, 2021 was important for me, first and foremost, because it was Diana Ross's 77th birthday. And I consider her to be one of my Orishas, right? And of course, as I'm waking up, of course, I'm thinking about her, but as I'm getting on my socials, people are talking about this video that Lil-Nas-X has released. And I'm like, well, Lil-Nas-X is always doing something. Because not only is he an artistic genius, he's like a social media genius, and he just really knows how to capture the imagination of kind of like this social media universe that we're in. And then I kind of started to see screenshots of the video, and I kind of looked at it in kind of like this very preliminary sense. And I was kind of like, okay. And then kind of like within the context of hip hop, I started to think about Biggie's verse from Suicidal Thoughts, where he says, when I die, fuck it, I want to go to hell because I'm a piece of shit. It ain't hard to fucking tell. It don't make sense going to heaven with the goody goodies dressed in white. I like black Timbs and black hoodies. God will probably have you on some real strict shit. No sleeping all day, no getting my dick licked. Hang with the goody goodies lounging in paradise. Fuck that shit. I want to tote guns and shoot dice. So I kind of connected it to what Lil-Nas-X was trying to do, in like these two incidences, you have like these bodies, right? And these communities of people, right? Who have been discarded by the church, right? That institution, as not living right, as damned, as doomed to like this eternal hell, where you have Biggie that kind of represents like that street hustler, and you have Lil-Nas-X that really represents this kind of like radicalized queer body. And in both of those instances, both Lil-Nas-X and Biggie have kind of chosen to say, okay, I'm going to hell. Guess what? I'm good with that. I'm okay with that. Because I'm not trying to hang in eternity with y'all anyway, because y'all some squares. And I'm not, and that's not really me, and that's not my vibe. And I also bring this up to kind of like establish this precedent of like the imagery that Lil-Nas-X uses as a hip hop artist doesn't necessarily come out of nowhere. He did not just come out of left field with kind of like this whole imagery of like in embracing hell, or really kind of like engaging and interacting with the idea of a devil or with Satan. You have Biggie's verse. You have a whole group called 3-6 Mafia. And then even if you're thinking about, Brother DMX, who we are definitely sending healing energies and vibes to, and how he has a whole album talking about it's dark and hell is hot, and how he as kind of like this person of faith, right, has really kind of like engaged and struggled with kind of like the darkness and satanic within him. So I kind of bring that piece up to say that Lil-Nas-X is definitely operating in a lineage within hip hop. He's fleshing it out, he's taking it in a different direction, but like he's definitely operating within like a lineage and within a precedent, kind of like within the hip hop genre. And then I just find it interesting that you would bring up Brother Steve Harvey, right? Bless his heart, he's wonderful and he means well. But it's kind of like he gets up and talks about how the video is satanic, right? When he just got on the verses and was kind of like homophobic and offensive to like a lot of the queer folks that were trying to just enjoy Earth, Wind, and Fire and the Ozzy Brothers on Easter Sunday night, right? And then even for these people that want to say what Lil-Nas-X did was satanic or worshiping the devil, I'm like, did you watch the video? Did you watch it? Did you actually watch it till the end? Or did you just meet the point of the shock value, right? And then you just decided that you were going to turn off and you weren't going to investigate it any further. Because if you watch the video, it actually isn't satanic worship, but he actually killed Satan, right? In a way that really connected to my experience, once again, as someone who is Baptist, as someone who is Pentecostal, and particularly how, Friday, March the 26th was not only Diana Ross's 77th birthday, but it was also the week before Good Friday. And within the traditions and the institutions of Christian belonging that I come from, it's not necessarily biblically accurate, but it feels good and it shouts us to where we say, Jesus goes down to hell and preaches a revival, and then he gets up 3 days later, right? So I really actually posted to Facebook where I said, a week before Good Friday, where many Black queer Christians will remember the passion and sacrifice of Jesus Christ, Lil-Nas-X went down to hell and twerked a revival, then stole the keys from death, hell, and the grave. This is actually Black queer liberation theology. Because yes, he goes down and he twerks a revival, and he twerks as a way of speaking a language that demons will understand. And he seduces his demons, and he faces his demons, and he engages his demons. And right when his demons have kind of let their guard down, he snatches the horns away. And he kind of like proclaims victory as far as kind of like this whole new identity for himself.
As you were saying, Joseph, Nas-X really does a phenomenal job with the imagery he uses in his video, also in his lyrics and how he brings things together. I think he is a master in his craft. He's a true artist. And I'm grateful, Joseph, that you brought in the lineage that talk about their context and the images that they hear as being hell, right? And what they do as evil and as hell, and that's it. And I think following that lineage, Lil-Nas-X is really tackling that space. That everything that you tell me that I am is evil. Everything that you tell me that I am is me giving in to almost like my humanness, right? Mm-hmm. Or the flesh, if you want to stay within a biblical context, and the theological terms that have been coined around it, right? You're living by the flesh, and yet I don't know if you noticed in the video, there's a tree, and the tree has some Greek words on it.
Right.
And I had that caught my attention, and I looked it up. It's actually a quote from Plato. Since their natural form had been cut in two, each one longed for its own half, its own other half. And I think that there's that illusion that everybody's trying to lead to, that this is a song about love. So I'm glad you're also talking about, Christ's love and going into hell and going back up, and he's following sort of this narrative as well. But that which is denied by the church is that which is who I am. And if we say that God created all things and all things to be good, then who I am is good, but that is what you're rejecting. And so then the challenge is, then that which you call hell has to be good as well. That which you call hell and think is wrong, you're doing it to create some hierarchy, right? To make your what you desire better than what I desire and what I long for, even though you place me in this context, right? And so you get these pieces of that in Nas-X's in a video and in his lyrics. And I don't know if you saw, he did a supplemental video in which he breaks down
the Genius video where he breaks down his lyrics.
Which is, I'm floored by this. He's just a lyrical genius, in which how he pieces the film, Hollywood life, his passions and his desires, how he's fully aware. Joseph, you when you were speaking, he was fully aware of what he was doing, as he kills Satan at the end, and puts on the crown for himself, because in part, even in that, he's saying, I'm fully aware of what I'm doing, and I'm fully aware of what I know what's the culture is like, but I know where my limits lie. I know where I can go and can't go. Even though he challenges himself, was it worth it? He's cognizant of the space he exists in and lives in, but he's not fazed by it, because he does have, and in that sense, I'm thinking he's saying, hey, this is who I am and this is who I want to be, and I know I have a call of myself to use my craft as a tool to express that which I think is right, that which I think is important.
And then kind of like the whole notion of where, even with what you were saying, Dr. Ray, is about him intentionally wanting to normalize queer sexuality, to where he's kind of like, okay, if Little Baby can talk about throat babies, and if in his video he can be riding on kind of like female ejaculate, on like a wave of female ejaculate, or if Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion can talk about WAP, then I should be able to talk about, shooting a child in my dude's mouth while I'm riding. And like, just in a very real way, and kind of like even referencing kind of like that Genius video, like, yes, there's this richness in what he offers, but like there's also kind of like this elementary quality, right? And there's kind of like this very simple premise to where, this is him being sprung over a boy. This is him being kind of like sprung over kind of like this artist who he doesn't name, kind of like inviting him to his space while he was in an Airbnb during COVID, trying to get work together for his next album, and kind of like really finding out that he really has like feelings for this individual. And even kind of like when he talks about the drugs, kind of like the cocaine and the weed and the white, kind of like really saying, I wish I could be that for you. Kind of like what Beyonce says in Partition, of kind of like, I want to be the girl that you like, and even Dr. Ray, to what you said, kind of like around how if we truly believe that God is this all-encompassing being of love, even that which we have placed in hell is ultimately good, kind of made me think of Psalm 139, where it says, even when I make my bed in Sheol, you'll be there. So like, even in that place where we send souls to be eternally damned, it's still not so powerful to where the divine cannot have access to it. For me, as someone who is, at the stage of my 30s where I'm rounding up to 40, I'm 35, and I came out in 2001 when I was 15 going on 16. So a very different time for LGBTQ folk, Black LGBTQ folk, and Black LGBTQ Christians, and how for me to live and see this moment, right? Because even though I'm still a young person with all those institutional, structural, ideological forces that came against me, I didn't necessarily have to live to see this moment. So for me to live to see this moment of, just a Lil-Nas-X, a Lena Waithe, a Janelle Monáe, kind of just all like these Black queer juggernauts just kind of like kicking down the doors. They're, to paraphrase Maya Angelou, they are literally the dream and the hope of the slave, right? And then I also thought about, because this Lil-Nas-X moment also happened during this moment with Donnie McClurkin, right? To where Donnie McClurkin has kind of like really been known as kind of like this ex-gay gospel singer who really purports that God has delivered him from his homosexuality. And there was this video clip that has recently started to make its way around the socials where he says, well, I've just accepted that I'm going to be alone for the rest of my life because I don't know how to love a woman. So saying it without saying it, right? And kind of like just a lot of like the Black queer folks in my social networks are just kind of like, bro, this ain't deliverance. Because deliverance is supposed to deliver you into life and life more abundantly. And for you as a man who's in your 60s, who in this day and age, 60 doesn't mean what it meant, when I was born 30 years ago. And 60 isn't looked at as over the hill as it once was. So for you to say, as a man who still has vibrancy and desire, that the only option you see for yourself is just to be alone for the rest of your life because you cannot fit into what was given to you. And it's kind of like you're holding on to this harmful poison in the name of holiness, and you're still too afraid to really reach out for that new thing. That's not deliverance. And it's almost like, to kind of like bring it back into kind of like this Lil-Nas-X moment, I almost pray that Lil-Nas-X could be a moment of deliverance for the Donnie McClurkins of the world.
But that also brought up a book I've been reading. It's called Why Christianity Must Change or Die, and how although we're living in this, we're living in the 21st century with all the technology that we have, Christianity still views God as, very literally living up there in heaven when we've already gone to the heavens, right? When we've explored all these things, we are still reading the Bible literally like we were either in the time of Moses or in the time of Jesus. I mean, I have a 5-year-old. My 5-year-old understands technology more than her grandmother. So you can't go to her the same way as you did to Jesus. She doesn't even understand it. And I don't understand why, and it's not only Christianity, why religion is so stuck in the past and refuses to move forward, why they're so afraid to understand God differently, to understand people that they don't know or people they don't know differently, things they haven't experienced. We live in such fear, and I don't know why. I don't know why we're not open.
We live in fear, but then we turn around and say that God has not given us a spirit of fear. Right?
Yeah.
Class, can we say cognitive dissonance?
Aaron, you've been quiet the whole time. You got anything?
Yeah. Man, I thank you so much. Joseph, amazing. I'm just in awe of what you're contributing to this dialogue. Thank you so much. Dr. Reyes, as always. Honestly, this video, as an artist and as a young, growing theologian, this video hit home for me because I realized that I've been battling my own identity for so long, and I didn't understand what I was or who I was and how do I fit and all this, and growing up, you look around and you see that majority is acting a certain kind of way, so you kind of see that maybe that's the pattern you're supposed to follow, right? But then it becomes problematic when these patterns hurt you, and so I bumped and clashed with a lot of things, and so this video for me was like a visualization of my journey. It was like a set of moving symbols, if you would, and it was really deep. I mean, to go inside yourself and really face those dark places, or go explore those dark places, and use whatever how, and I love how using twerking, twerking the demons, like I love that, like if you have something to distract them or hypnotize them or control them, so to speak, or even enter into relationship with them, it's heavy because I've gone through, I started going through that journey of just coming into relationship with these dark components within myself, and honestly, it's been really healing. So this video also for me symbolizes that growth into healing, and it's not what status quo says that it's supposed to look like. That I love, at first I said, wow, like the way that he hypnotized what was symbolically like the leader down there, the head honcho, and then took the horns, like the crown, so to speak. Like I am now, that, like for me, that was just like, he kind of became whole.
I that crown piece, because once again, he's an artistic genius there. I mean, the crown, is symbolizing fate. Who controls fate for him? And he's really saying, I'm not going to be left here. This is not my fate. I control the fate that I'm choosing. Which that's why he crowns himself. Even though, and it's the space where the people said, hey, this is where you belong. And he goes, then I'll be the king here. This is where I rule. This is where I control. But that space is important for him, because when he's being judged, I don't know if you noticed that the people that are around him
Or all him.
are all him, but interestingly enough, they're painted as like sort of like stone-like idols or not maybe not even idolized, but this statuesqueness, which is you have to be this, right? It's static. There's only one way to look. There's only one way to be. There's only one color. There's only one this and one that. And that's what he's battling against. He's actually battling against himself and what he should be and what he control, and who he becomes. And the going to the heaven is actually riding the pole down, that juxtaposition. It's both one and the same for him. It's not that he's been rejected from the heavens, but that to go into the heavens for him is that ride down. There is no either or. They're both the same. And so he's really saying, hey, this that what you think is not really it. And he even challenged that. He challenges the look. He challenges what everything should be. So yeah. I mean, it's that deep imagery. it's a powerful piece. I do think that he's challenging though this one image of thought, this one idea that things are supposed to be absolutely, literally the way Scripture is, and Scripture is just full of metaphor and story. That's what it is. We're looking at the stories of the history of a people.
I was gonna say one particular people.
And
so it is manipulated to boost them.
And if we go farther into that, the certain particular people, right? Because
yes.
You can look at it and say, this is a certain class of people. I bring in Dolores Williams when she highlights Hagar, and how hey, this one people overpower another,
right?
Or if you want to take Brueggemann, and he says, hey, in the top of Israel's glory, they were just as bad as anyone else, because they hurt their people, because power became an issue, because of control became an issue, because the temple was controlled by the king and it wasn't for the people.
Christian scripture and how our holy text glorifies one nation of people going to occupy a whole other nation of people.
Correct. And we go against it.
And how, particularly for those of us who are people of color, various different parts of that spectrum, those are some waters that we need to trouble, right? Or
Correct.
Kind of even going back to kind of like what you were trying to talk about in far as the flesh, and how we really need to have a discussion about the flesh, and even going back to Joel's point of how we just lift up and worship scripture as this infallible thing, that it isn't necessary, but how really, and this is even kind of like going back to kind of like some of my formations by Dr. Valerie Bridgman, of how, we say we Christian, but really, we're Paulinians, because we quote Paul a whole lot more than we quote Jesus. We have built on our rock on Paul a whole lot more than we built our rock on Christ. But we think we built our rock on Christ because Paul taught so much about Christ. And it's kind of like, we talk a lot about Christ, but do we necessarily follow Christ? But even to kind of like just go back to what Paul would always say about the flesh, and how we have to kill our flesh, and how we have to subdue our flesh, and how we have to control our flesh, as we as a country are watching a trial around the state killing Black flesh. We got some waters we need to trouble, because for me, as a Black person, as a queer person, I have enough people, I have enough institutions, I have enough systems who are passionately invested in the death of my flesh without me assisting them. I ain't gonna help you kill me. If you gonna kill me, you gonna have to do that all by yourself.
The conversation going from Hagar to Israel to what you just said, Joseph, made me think of a couple of things. First of all, how God in all of this, right? The God of the Israelites and the God of Paul and the God that we call our own God is like in Hagar's story. I'm just saying Hagar. When Hagar is raped, thrown out, and all those, God is like, yo, I'm cool with that. I got no problem with that. I am in harmony with Abraham in this, right? Nothing that. That's what Dolores Williams talks about. But going through all this, it's really amazing to me in terms of, I think it goes back to that fear and change, like how we consistently say in the same place that harbors hate. Even when we hate, it harbors us to hate ourselves many times. The hate the fleshly part of us, which could be anything. It's not only sexual. Everybody, like the church demonizes sex, but it could be especially that I want to have nice clothes. I want to have a nice car. you know, I want whatever it is, you know, I want a big ass house that's 6 bedrooms and 6 baths when only 2 of us are gonna live there. We need to make the change. We need to make the change, I think just us being on this podcast, the way we think, we are the ones that are called to cause a shift for the next generation.
I got a little uneasy, a little bit, something you said, if I want the mansion and everything. I was like, oh, we just want to be a little bit careful on that. There's nothing wrong in wanting things or being blessed or benefiting from stuff like that, just as long as it doesn't then change a certain way of thinking for us. For me, I have problems with the prosperity gospel a bit, in the sense that, you know, oh, blessings for God. If you invest in the church, you'll be blessed. And you have a lot of people that are poor, you know, giving hundreds of dollars to the church and they're not being blessed. And for me, that is a taking advantage of the people of God. A lot of times we are taking advantage because we hide behind another person's doctrine. Mm-hmm. We hide behind, I think, Joseph, as you said, that Pauline, we serve Pauline scriptures, not what Christ offers, right? Christ was partying with people. He was with the big wigs too, right? He partied with senators and all these greats, mm-hmm. tax collectors. But he wasn't fazed by it. He knew what he was there for. He knew his role. He turned water into wine. He was the life of the party. But he offered a lot of challenges in that space. He offered a lot of challenges to other religious traditions, who felt that religion was made to be better than other people. And that's not what religion was about. That wasn't what relationship with the divine being was about in Christ's context. If I can, piggyback on something that Joseph was saying, and that we see these limitations with Paul because Paul himself was a man of 2 nations. Not only was he a Jew, but he was Roman. He had a certain type of privilege going on there, that he wasn't fazed by certain things. But but when we deal with this context of the bodies of people of color, and not only bodies of Black bodies, but Latino bodies and Asian bodies, we need to see what's that piece that's hidden, and going back to Nas, that needs to be opened up and revealed, and then to say where is that divine that's there trying to lift up and reveal something there.
Really just taking this all in, and this is just really a rich conversation, but to kind of like even bring it back even more to Lil-Nas-X, kind of like with a comment that Aaron had made earlier, kind of around how that ability to seduce and to kind of like hypnotize, like your demons. I thought 2 things. 2 things was James Baldwin's quote of, "You cannot conquer what you don't face." But then also Aaron's comments really made me even think even more of how like that particular imagery of Nas taking the horns off of the devil was kind of like this remix of Samson and Delilah, right? To where much in the tradition of that story, kind of like Delilah was able to seduce Samson and get Samson kind of down there and then cut his locks and got his power. And in the same way, Nas was able to kind of like seduce kind of, and also I think it's really important to note that the Satan in that video was not an actual human actor, right? Like the Satan in that video was like a CGI creation. And the entry point that makes for me with Satan, the Satan in that video being kind of like the CGI creation and not another flesh and blood human person like you and I, kind of even harkens back to how the judges that sentenced Lil-Nas-X to hell were really just different manifestations of Lil-Nas-X. So you kind of have this CGI Satan that is kind of like this audio visual manifestation of kind of like that conflict and that struggle and like those voices within Lil-Nas-X that would seek that sought to suffocate Lil-Nas-X. And once again, this is kind of like leaning on my churchy language, sought to sift Nas-X like wheat, right? So that's kind of like just what's been ruminating around in my mind, even while I've been listening to the rich offerings that you all have been providing.
You know, Joseph, if I can piggyback this, you know, thank you for mentioning the CGI of this piece. If I can jump into the actual film of Call Me By Your Name, in which the director really is careful in placing imagery and music really into place to talk about that. The last scene of the film talks about it's called Visions of Gideon. So he uses biblical imagery there. The song is actually based on biblical imagery, Visions of Gideon. But then he says, is this a video? Is this image that goes on repeat that I'm constantly having to not only remember or have in memory, right? But was it real? Is it real? And so I'm so grateful you said that, Joseph, because CGI, it's a visual representation of something that he's battling within himself, but it's repetitive. It's something that he's always having to deal with, right? Within himself. And just like the film, he goes, it's on repeat. Is this a video? Is it a video? Is it a video? This idea of this memory that's so strong, whether it's the memory of the people that are telling him that you're going to hell for who you are, which is then becomes repeated in himself, right? He sees himself as mirror in the terms of these statuesque beings saying, you're going to hell, you're going to hell. And him having to break that. And then he has that ultimate CGI character, the Satan himself, that he sort of has to coax and bring him to his knees to control that. To say, no, that's not going to be the way no more. But this idea of video and image, that it's that battle, that's an internal battle within us. And he begins his video with that. He goes, we can't do this in life. In life, this is not acceptable. But he brings us into his world, and that the character he's going against, which is himself, has a third eye. And the third eye is always that representation of something deeper, right? Let's enter into an inner reality or transcendent reality, which is an inner looking within. Aaron, you probably want to say something to that because you've been doing a lot of work with that. And then to say, this is video-like. This isn't real, right? This is something that you want to be in the real. But it haunts like memory, and we have to challenge that. We need to challenge that space there, that this can be real, but right now, because we keep it hidden, because we only hold it in the dark and in the secret, like he brings in the Hollywood piece, and in his words, let me see, you're cute enough to fuck with me tonight, looking at the table, all I see is weed and white. Baby, you live in the life, but nigga, you ain't living right. And then he talks about Hollywood culture there. But Hollywood culture is hidden in a sort of way, right? It's hidden because that's the way it is. But the real life, that's not what they want. They only want what the actor can bring. So then here are these memories and pieces of what he wants to be realized. His sexuality, his gender, his identity is really there. And you have to sort of bring that into light, and you have to sort of dispel some of the imagery, or dispel some of these video pieces that may haunt us, to bring it into light and say, this is really who we are. And it's not bad. It's not evil. To be who I am is not evil. To be who I am is not to be demonized in sort of way. And so, but the challenge is that he has to defeat that within himself, because if he defeats that within himself first, it doesn't matter what anyone says outside.
And it's kind of like what Thurman says as far as really kind of like this imagery and this metaphor and this representation of hell within this video can really look at how, if you really seek to walk with the divine, and if you really seek to walk with this Christian discipline, you are going to be summoned to that which Thurman calls the midnight of the soul. Christianity is not, despite what some of these prosperity gospel people want to tell you, despite what this current kind of like capitalistic neo-Pentecostal mega church, what Gardner C. Taylor calls cotton candy Christianity, would kind of tell you, Christianity is a religion and a faith of confrontation. Christianity, in its true sense, if we're gonna follow that brown-skinned person from Nazareth, who was born in the parking lot of a Motel 6 on the side of the road in Bethlehem, to a teenage mother who was married to a man that wasn't the boy's blood daddy. If this is the faith you want to commit to, it's going to empower you to do so. It's going to equip you to do so. It's going to be a source of comfort for you to do so. However, it is not going to be this narcotic escape that numbs you from those places of conflict and pain. And I mean, it's kind of like, okay, we're just coming out of Easter, and we're now in Easter time. And it's kind of like, well, at least Jesus only had to do it one time. But for those, like, for those of us, kind of like in our human experience, we're constantly being called to Calvary. And we are constantly being called to face and interrogate and to identify tools and to exercise those tools that will help us come over those midnights and really reach kind of like that higher original self, you know, that we may be.
If I may add, just contribute a very brief theological reflection. On the beginning of the video, I love how the assumption of the serpent, you know, like it's playing on biblical imagery. So this serpent, you know, is coming down the tree, but then the serpent has hints of imagery of him in it, as if he's looking at himself, which, I mean, obviously it was him, but the point is that it wasn't that obvious. Like, they applied makeup. So it's this image now that kind of is relative, right? And this image that he can relate to. So like, it wasn't really too much of a seducing. It makes you wonder, right? It's more of a, oh, you're relatable. So now they enter into a relationship, which thus brings about, I guess, knowledge or awakening, and then questioning. And then it's interesting that then from that point on starts this quest, right? Symbolically representing being thrown out of paradise, if you will. But I love how the hints of biblical imagery are like subtly there in the background. But they kind of just allow us to reimagine what we've read so much or preached about so much. Or if I was, you know, symbolically humanity, and I came into relationship with this symbolic creature that was a serpent, that, but it wasn't like a normal serpent, and it kind of grabbed my attention, right? I guess a normal serpent, I would just be like, yeah, that's just a whatever. But this one was very different. It had to like catch my attention. It had to be relative. And if God is relative, then how are we to say that this encounterment was not part of God? you know. So that's kind of just where my mind was.
I have a question for you all. Right, next week I have to preach a sermon on Mark 10 where little children come to Jesus and the disciples push him away, and Jesus says, I gotta get. Jesus says basically, let the kids in, and then he says, don't push these children away. Don't ever get between them and me, because these children are the very center of the life in the kingdom. Unless you accept God's kingdom in the simplicity of a child, you'll never get in. And I say that, and I'm going to ask, do you think it is that we've lost our theological imagination, our godlike imagination, or whatever it is, that we're in the place we are today? Because we started by saying how, quote unquote, imaginative this Lil-Nas-X video is, and how, for me, like, it's really time-bound to being made in the image of God, right? Image and likeness of God. So do you think the reason we are the way we are today is because we've lost that imagination? We're pushing away that childlike imagination that we have.
Yeah, on the note of this childlike imagination, this is so interesting because I was thinking, I was reflecting on my intense reading that Dr. Reyes has prescribed. But it's been opening me up to like bigger ideas, like this idea that from conception we're taught through patriarchy lens, through a patriarchy understanding. So every term, every analogy is all through a patriarchy understanding. So like if we really wanted to imagine a world where women were equal or be considered equal, we have to reimagine all of our symbols, all of our imaginings, terms, understandings, and deconstruct them, and then, build something that reflects that. So for me, I was thinking like, I would have to just like go through a series of just forgetting everything, right? And start from scratch, like kind of like this childlike understanding where I'm in the infancy phase of just being open to what is or what is not. Not developing this bias perspective that was, I guess, programmed into us. Like we just believe in these things like nature, but we can't explain them. Like those are just hints of just things that were subtly programmed into us, and we think it's fact. And then we actually kill people based on these beliefs, right? Like we say, for example, that if you're not doing this or look a certain kind of way, you're sinning, you're going to hell. You're literally a terrible, symbol, the epitome, and someone could reinterpret what their meaning is. Why is that sinful? And say, well, did you understand the context in which it's being said? Versus a preacher just, exclusively pulling it and then preaching that this particular thing is a sin, so like it does make me question absolutely everything, actually.
So I do think it's interesting, kind of like bringing it back to Lil-Nas-X and kind of like this Black queer context, how, so I heard you say the verse where it says, let the children come to me. And it kind of made me think of how in my coming up, as a Black queer person, Black queer folks specifically, kind of like one of our colloquial terms for each other were the children or the kids. And kind of like within that context, I find it interesting how, even during that time, the children and the kids were not allowed to get proximity to Jesus because they weren't allowed proximity to the institutional church. Or in order to get that proximity, they had to mutilate themselves and denounce their being. But to actually attempt to answer your actual question, as far as have we gotten away from our imagination My immediate thought was, yes, we have given up imagination and innovation. We have given these things up, and we have traded them so we can be gatekeepers. And so we can have proximity to power, and we can lord these notions of holiness over other people. And just and kind of like when you talk about this whole question of imagination, I'm even hearing of how we as Christians, we are following and basing our lives in a text that was kind of compiled by people who thought that the text that they were compiling was not going to need to last so long that we were going to have to use it. Because when they talked about Jesus coming back, like they were talking about it in ways that they thought, when I get paid, let me go on to the beauty parlor and let me get myself together. Jesus coming back Sunday after next. And then it kind of didn't happen. So I guess what I'm really trying to say is kind of like we lost that sense of imagination, or we gave it away because our foreparents kind of got to this place, well, I don't know if he's coming back, and we're gonna have to find something to hold on to make some type of sense of this down here. And that may be where, we kind of lost our imagination. And then to even go back to what Aaron was saying, Aaron kind of made me think of, okay, we're just coming out of Women's History Month. And just something that I did within kind of like my own private devotional and prayer time is, at least for that month of March, whenever I was reading scripture, whenever I was reading one of my devotionals, I was just really intentional to refer to God as her, to refer to God as she, to refer to God as mother, to kind of like decolonize my mind in that way. And even now, even though there's a familiarity and a lineage with looking at God as man and looking at God as he, and as a lover of gospel music, and he's got it all in control, and he's got the whole world in his hands, and he can handle it. There's a familiarity for me. Also for me, as someone who's looking to create a faith that is in my own image. As a non-binary person, really making myself uncomfortable and troubling the waters for myself by more or less referring to God as they. And if nothing else, definitely saying that, when I do stand in public to proclaim in any way, as far as a faith setting or a gospel setting, really being intentional about referring to God as they, because God as he isn't comfortable for everybody. And God as Father, for some, is very trauma inducing and triggering. So just for me as Joseph, that's just some of the ways that, I'm even trying to reclaim, my sanctified imagination and my sacred imagination.
Aaron, can you jump in here and if you're comfortable, and tell us why your pronouns are what they are?
Oh yeah. It was interesting because I took a course at Union Theological Seminary, and the starting of the course, first day, people were like, "Hi, my name is so and so, and these are my pronouns." And I was like, "What?" This is you guys are doing that like here, like, and I didn't understand because I didn't see it at NYTS. So it became interesting, and I was just like, wow, like, you know, like I do want to participate in this idea of pronouns, you know, and if I did, what would I select? So for me, it was kind of like a new birth, you know, like I got to select my pronouns, you know. This is something that wasn't taken from me or chosen for me. This is something I get to choose, you know. So I came to the conclusion of being comfortable with pronouns they, their, them, because I realized that, you know, I, or who I think I am, is not one thing. So I believe in this idea that I encompass the universe. God is, you know, in me. So, you know, to say God is male or female, or to choose, is in itself for me even biased or absolute. So I felt very comfortable to resonate with they, their, them.
If I can just say something that's interesting there, is that we choose that, and going back to that question that you were asking, Joel, about that text, "Let the children come to me, for theirs is the kingdom." You know, the way I was looking at that passage, you know, children, they are all imagination. They have very few rules, and they have very few structured ideas. Their ideas are brimming. Their mind is just, you know, it's a wait and see, you know, and seeing where that goes. And a lot, and when I see Jesus saying, you know, let them come, let them hear, let them experience, because they're the ones that are going to be able to, that need to express it, but express it without rules. Express it, or to say that it begins with this experience. You need to have that experience first to allow the imagination to create and form and develop an understanding, a notion of God, to understand the notion of this Christ that we're talking about, to understand this notion of what the new church looks like, or what does it mean to be human. And so when he says, "Let the children come," it's the breakdown of these walls or these structures that people are afraid of let go because they think that is how it's supposed to be. You know, I was listening to Joseph talk and Aaron, and they're saying they chose to do this, but to choose is a creative act. It's not something that's told to them, right? It's not something that someone else says I have to do, or someone else does this. It's, I choose to do this. And so there's that part, that freedom, if you will, that allows your input in. I've experienced something that's divine. Do I choose it or not? How do I choose it? In what ways will I choose it? In what ways am I going to express this love of God from where I am and from my point? And so I think there's this power that both Aaron and Joseph was really saying that I think is found within this passage of children, right? To let go of these rules and regulations or these structures, you know. In Whitehead's Religion in the Making, which is one of my favorite texts, you know, he says the doctrine and dogmas are so limiting. Actually, they're dead already, because they've already been structured. There's really no much more to talk about there, and it could limit us. Maybe we want the safety of walls, but then we lose out what entering into the wilderness or journeying out or adventuring looks like. You know, it seems interesting, you know, that Nas-X is internalizing, but actually he's allowing us to see it. So that means he's actually breaking the walls of his inner self and wants to reveal that because he wants you to see that there is nothing wrong with this. Will you be willing to adventure and walk in that way, in at least displaying it in his work?